So, Sifu, you beat that second stage yet? If you did, good for you. I am so proud of you. But if you didn't, let me see if I can help you out. In my last video, I talked about how dodging and doing the parry is pretty much going to carry you through a lot of the first stage and actually through a lot of the game. But the sub bosses and the mini bosses start to, as you move through the later stages, they start to show a few exceptions that can mess up what I was talking about before, particularly with super armor. And if you're not familiar with what super armor is, essentially it's basically when an attack comes at you and you can't interrupt it no matter what you do. Or it takes an attack plus another attack to interrupt it. And in Sifu, all mini bosses and bosses have this characteristic. And in a lot of cases, a lot of these enemies, they like to chain attacks together with super armor. So if you're not prepared for it, not expecting it, and you just dodge one or you parry one and the rest of the attack continues, you're gonna get punished. Basically, if you try to interrupt their chain attack with an attack, you'll get punished by the rest of their attack string. So really what you want to do is wait until you see the slowed time while dodging their attack, or physically see your opponent get knocked back by your parry before you start your attack string. But I do want to point this out though, because it's really important to keep in mind. If you try to parry every single one of their attacks in their string, you're still going to mess up their structure. Every successful parry will damage their structure meter, which is really important to getting them beat down quickly. And with later game bosses, this is a really helpful tip to get you killed less. Now, I'm going to be honest, I can parry pretty decent, but I don't recommend trying to parry every single one of the attacks in their string unless you're really good at it, because it's going to cost you a lot more than dodging, and you'll probably get killed trying to parry. But I gotta be honest, parrying is a high risk, high reward tactic, and there are moves you can unlock from the shrine that will allow you to do easier follow-up attacks post parry, so you can leave your opponent more open so you can get more punishment. So there's that. And then on top of that, there's also attacks enemies can do that, I mean, for now I'm just gonna call them guard breaks, but these attacks, you know them when you see them. When the attack comes in, their arm or their leg starts to glow orange or red, and then you got a big move coming in. Now, if you try to block this attack, it is going to wreak havoc on your structure gauge. Pretty much, if you have your gauge even just a little bit filling up, there's a good chance it might break it all together. And then once that happens, you are completely open for even more punishment. And there's even later enemies in the game that if they do break your structure, they'll follow up with their own version of a finisher move like yours. If you can time the parry right, then the end result on their end is they're gonna get stunned and staggered, and then they'll be open for a punishment. So the risk versus reward. I myself have not nailed a parry in these moments a lot, so I can't confirm how easy it is to do, but you can do it for sure. And then on top of that, you got the weapons that people can have. That can also complicate everything. Early on, it starts off with bottles. Enemies will come at you with those, and they throw them and they hit you with them. But if they hit you with one, you are obviously going to be stunned for a few seconds. And the same thing's going to happen to your enemies, of course, which leaves you available for a free attack string on them, or throw them and set them up for more punishment. Unless, of course, they catch the bottle, which I've only seen a couple times, but man, I'm never prepared for it when it comes. And then there's these quarter staves. If you come across an enemy who's got one of them, you want to make sure you disarm them of that thing as soon as possible. If you sweep them, they'll drop it and then you can pick it up, but if they're still holding it, it's a real problem to deal with, especially when you're not prepared. A lot of this is thanks to the fact that a lot of the enemies who use them, they like to mix up trips and sweeps into their attack string. So if you goof up, you might get tripped and then you get even more punishment. And it's a little tricky to just step back to get out of their range, because they like to follow up and swing a lot, and they also have a lot of range with the quarter stave, so you got to pick your poison. And then of course, if you actually use a quarter stave, maybe your first one or two attacks will connect, but some of the follow-ups that go after it might whiff your target, so they don't do that to you, but you do it to them. And then there's blades, which are my favorite weapon. The catch here with these is if you block them, you're still going to take damage, period. But you can still parry their attacks. Of course, if you mess it up, you're going to take a lot of damage. If you're diligent enough and you play this game enough and you get killed a lot and you keep running over the same levels, you're gonna learn the attack patterns with the bladed weapons, so you'll be dodging them or you'll be parrying them in no time. So you shouldn't worry too much about that, unless of course it's the third boss, because she's bladed and that's really annoying. So with everything I just said, a lot of stuff is stacked against you, so let me give you a few key pointers that will help you stay alive longer and do a lot more damage faster. So let me get into those really quick. First off, like I said in my previous video, you cannot button mash. It might get you far on the first stage, but once you're surrounded in the later stages, it's gonna get you wrecked. So really the name of the game here for combat is managing your structure while breaking down your opponents. And there's a few things we can do to help get that done quickly. The first big one is use your throws as much as possible. Period, period, period. You can only do a throw when you have your opponent fully stunned. You can get that by parrying them perfectly or hitting them with a clean attack that leaves them stunned, obviously. And in those cases, you push X and square, and then you can aim in whatever direction you want to throw them, using the left stick. If you can, if you're close to something, like a structure of any kind, toss them at it. Throw them at a table, throw them at a chair, throw them at a wall, throw them down the stairs, throw them at anything that can hit them and give more structure damage to them. It might even leave them open to more attacks, especially if you throw them up against a wall. Because then you can follow up with a sweep, and then you can pound them while they're on the ground, and you might even at that point have them ready to get killed. A really nice one to do with the throw is throw them over a railing, because sometimes you can chuck them off and they plummet to the death. And of course, if you throw them at other people, it'll stun those people and you can either interrupt their attack or leave them open for a follow-up. Especially when you're outnumbered, if you can throw somebody, just even if you're not throwing them at anything because there's nothing around, if you just throw them away, they'll run to something else or they'll just be out of sight, and that'll give you one less person to deal with while you're dealing with other people. And speaking of being outnumbered, do not get surrounded. When you've played long enough and you've memorized everybody's attack strings, sure, you can look like a badass and you can dodge and parry, and everybody who swings at you while you're in the middle of the circle, they're gonna get destroyed. In the event that you're not there yet and you're surrounded, you want to get out of there as soon as possible. If you stun somebody, throw them out of the way and then run away from the center of the circle. Enemies are really good at coordinating their attack strings, so one person might attack and just as that person finishes up, someone else might start attacking, or worst case, you're attacking somebody after they finishes and then a guy behind you hits you and messes up your string, and then you get jumped. All of a sudden 2 or 3 people are hitting you in perfect sync and now you're dead. And of course, if you can't run out of a circle, you're surrounded and there's nowhere to go, sweep a few people, throw a few guys. You'll at least have less people to deal with while you're trying to kill the people that are the most threatening. Speaking of sweeps, sweep, 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 sweep. Sweeping enemies needs to be one of your basic attacks. It's got everything you need to avoid getting killed, especially when you're facing 2 or 3 more enemies. One, if you're not ready to take all of them on at one time, if you sweep one, just like with the throw, they're on the ground and you can either pound them while they're there or at least leave them there while you deal with the other 2. It also completely disarms anybody using a weapon. So if somebody has something and it's a real threat to you, sweep that person first, pick up the weapon, and at least deal with that first. Now, I do understand the higher tier enemies can't be sweeped so easily, but they can be if you catch them off guard. Some people can be sweeped, and then when they get up, you can sweep them again, so you want to take advantage of that if you have to. Which brings me to my next point about weapons themselves. Be careful about throwing them. You can throw them, and if they hit the enemy, it'll stun them and leave them open for an attack, but it also, I think it damages the weapon or ruins its overall durability. I've seen instances where I threw a weapon, not a bottle, and then it breaks when it hits them, unless you increase the durability from the shrine, which is a really good thing to do, by the way. Throwing weapons at enemies is a real risk. Some of them catch them and some of them dodge them, and either that was gonna knock them out or kill them, but if they dodge it, now you're out of a weapon and it might not be what you want at that time. Especially if you're outnumbered, which happens a lot. One of those dudes might go pick up that weapon and now you're really screwed. One more key thing to worry about is the stairs. Use them to your advantage. Never be on the lower elevation of the stairs. if you fall down the stairs or you get kicked down the stairs, the more you roll and tumble, you'll take more damage. Same thing happens to enemies. So you always want to be on the elevated portion of the stairs, because if you knock them down, they're going to take even more damage. So it's a real nice tool to use. So there you have it. I hope these tips helped you. I hope to make you a better fighter and get you through the end of the game. And like I said before, if you wouldn't mind dropping me a like, I really appreciate it. It lets me know if this information was valuable too, and whether or not I should continue to make more. A sub to the channel wouldn't hurt either, because I definitely plan on making more content for this game. I know it's really hard and a lot of people have a lot of questions about it, especially since the game doesn't give you all the details that it probably should. Alright, that's it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next one.